The nature of laughter and humour. Why we laugh and joke and why it is essential for a peaceful world. Start with a disclaimer. I am not academic, so please bear in mind that this is just my hypothesis and should not be taken as a settled science. I am, however, correct. I have not found humour explained this way elsewhere, but if anyone can find such a source, please link it in the comments, as I would like to read it. I hope very much that should this idea gain some acceptance, the numerous avenues of research that present themselves due to this hypothesis will be studied so we can confirm and refine the ideas and better understand their consequences. If there's any part of this that isn't clear, please feel free to provide constructive feedback so I can improve my explanation. The social contexts to humour are not always obvious, so I will produce further examples to demonstrate how the various aspects work together. Some basic assumptions as a grounding for what we're going to go through today. Humans are social creatures who evolved in small tribes with a hierarchical structure established and maintained by both physical force and social interaction. The functions of our brains evolved to guide behaviours that maximise the probability that we will pass our genes down to the next generation. We evolved to enjoy eating, drinking and sex, as the enjoyment made it more likely that we would choose to undertake the activity, and therefore we were more likely to pass on our genes. We enjoy something so much that there is a huge global industry set up to part us with large sums of money we are willing to pay to experience that pleasure. Obviously I'm referring to restaurants, but comedy clubs work on the same principle. People are willing to pay to experience their evolved pleasures, such as laughing. Many aspects of our psychology function without us being aware that they are driving our behaviour. For example, we use grammar without being aware we are doing so. Laughter and humour have a purpose, and whatever that purpose is, it assisted our ancestors in getting our genes passed down the generations. As with any social behaviour, context is key, and we will need to understand the contextual backgrounds to humour in order to understand it. In summary, and with the correct contexts, we evolved to want to enjoy eating, we evolved to want and enjoy sex, we evolved to want and enjoy laughing. So, what is laughter? The original evolved function within our ancestral tribe. Laughter is a social signal. I am no threat. To display that we have no intent to attack another within our social group, either physically or socially. In our ancestral tribes, a sudden vulnerability could be taken advantage of by another tribe member in order to advance in the social hierarchy. We laugh to signal no threat in order to minimize the chance that whoever found themselves in a vulnerable position would lash out at us in order to protect their social standing. The individual laughing could be a witness to a vulnerability or the vulnerable individual. In each case, the signal is, I'm no threat. The vulnerability could take several forms. Physical, e.g. falling down or being hit on the head by falling fruit. Social, minor social rules mistakes such as child breaking, a minor taboo. Intellectual, being an idiot, or any combination of the above. So the 2A laughter equation. Man, that's egotistical. Anyway, laughter equals A plus B plus C, where A, a sudden situation within the social group where interpersonal conflict could occur or social positioning could be affected. B, no significant harm, either physical or social standing, taking place within the social group. C, no intention to take advantage of the situation to affect the social hierarchy. This applies to all laughter. The following examples demonstrate the idea and highlight how we all instinctively understand it, even though we are not consciously aware that this is what is happening. Nervous laughter, the signaling no threat. In a new social situation, one where we do not know the social rules and are afraid that we will make a mistake that could offend or otherwise cause conflict within the social group, we have nervous laughter. So if we compare this with our 2A laughter equation, item A, a sudden situation within the social group where, through a physical or social mistake, social positioning could be affected. This is the key variable in this example. We are preempting the social mistake because we are nervous of the consequences of the potential mistake. B, no significant physical harm taking place within the social group. We are in an unfamiliar social situation in this example rather than a physical or social conflict. C, no intention to take advantage of the situation to affect social hierarchy. So in this circumstance, you can laugh to signal whatever's happening, I'm no threat. So another example here. An individual who holds a high position within the social hierarchy falls over. As violence is often used to gain social position, the vulnerable situation in which he suddenly finds himself could be used by another tribe member to attack him in order to move up the hierarchy. If he wants to be sure to retain his social position, he will have to be primed to fight anyone around who may take advantage, even if their intent was to help. This would have negative evolutionary consequences, as any minor fall or other mistake could lead to violent conflict with the inherent risk of injury or death. If only there was some way for those around to signal that they have no aggressive intent. They laugh. And the reason laughter is audible is that they may be behind our hapless ancestor, so that a simple facial expression like smiling would be insufficient. An example from Richard Feynman's book, Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman. This is a social event that he went to in his early university career, put on by, I believe, the wife of the dean. Would you like cream or lemon in your tea, Mr. Feynman? It's Mrs. Eisenhart pouring the tea. I'll have both, thank you, I say, looking for where I'm going to sit, when suddenly I hear, hee hee hee. Surely you're joking, Mr. Feynman. Joking? Joking? What the hell did I just say? Then I realised what I had done. So that was my first experience with this tea business. Later on, after I'd been at Princeton longer, I got to understand this, hee 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 hee. In fact, it was at that first tea, as I was leaving, that I realised it meant you are making a social error. I should add that it actually meant you are making a social error and I will not use it against you. What does laughter tell us? The key characteristic of laughter, signalling of no threat within the social group. I am not a threat to you. I identify you, who I'm laughing at, as part of my social group, at least in part. I believe the social benefit to laughter is obvious, which is why we should take every opportunity to do so. It is this benefit that has led us to expand the use of laughter beyond the specific conflict avoidance to one of social bonding. What is comedy? / humour, whatever word you want to use. Comedy is the sharing of a fake situation of sudden physical, social or intellectual vulnerability in order to elicit the enjoyable laughter response. As discussed, the vulnerability can take different forms and be due to different reasons, but all could serve as a trigger to challenge an individual's social standing if it were to be a genuine situation. Fortunately for the comedian, we are primed to laugh. Evolution wants us to laugh, as it avoids conflict. Unfortunately for the comedian, comedy is a shared experience within a social group, and laughing with a comic requires a greater feeling of association. If you watch a comic come on stage, they will start by trying to build a rapport with the audience. The MC also performs this role. They know that they need to build a certain bond with the audience, or the comic will face a tough room. As with laughter occurring naturally, laughing at the shared faking of a situation of sudden physical, social or intellectual vulnerability serves to signal no threat and reinforces the social group. A great example of a fake mistake being funny is shown in the but that's pronounced Jimeoin video in the description. The funniest part of the stage joke is a very pure example of how an individual making an error can be funny. We see the situation where the mistake is made, an obvious intellectual mistake. If this was serious, the stupidity of the situation could have negative consequences for the social standing of the individual. Please remember that we evolved these emotional reactions when living in primitive tribes where life was a constant struggle to attain greater social standing with the associated increase in mating opportunities. We see the fake mistake, and because we identify with the comic and have no intent to harm him, the same evolved "I am no threat" laugh response is given. Funny how? This complex example serves to demonstrate that we all instinctively understand that laughter is a signal that I will not attack you, either physically or attack your position in the social hierarchy. Just as we have internal rules for the grammar of language that we are not consciously aware of, we all instinctively know what laughter means. Please view the linked Goodfellas Scene, link in the description, and please be aware of what the laughter signals to you. In the scene, Joe Pesci gives Ray Liotta a hard time with the "funny how" line. The interesting thing is, we all know the instant he starts laughing that he is not going to escalate to using force. We know instinctively that laughter signals the end of the threat of violence between Pesci and Liotta. Should suggest to us that laughter is a social signal of no threat. The group laughs, signalling that Joe Pesci's social mistake of talking to Liotta in the way he did is not going to be responded to with violence. They recognise that he was creating a fake situation of potential social conflict in order to elicit the enjoyable laughter response. As you watch the clip, please also be aware that during the scuffle between Pesci and the bar owner, the others in the group are laughing, and we, the audience, know, without thinking about it, that they are not involved in the physical conflict. They are signalling that they do not intend to physically attack Pesci. Please also note that we perceive, through the group laughing while the bar owner is hurt, that they have utter disregard for him. We perceive their disregard because we understand that laughter requires that no real harm is done within the social group. So they are not only signalling no threat to Pesci, but also that the bar owner is outside of their social group. Again, we know this instinctively, but unless we view humour through the lens that I have described, we do not understand why. Physical comedy. The simulation of falling down. Physical comedy involves an individual faking some form of physical mistake that, if it were real, could be taken advantage of in terms of attacking someone to move up the social hierarchy. Please remember that we evolved this during a time when we lived in tribes where social progress could come through violence. Someone falling on their face, in a certain context, induces us to signal that we will not use the situation against them. We evolved to enjoy signalling no threat, to reduce the likelihood of the individual who made the mistake perceiving a threat during their moment of vulnerability. The comic simulates the mistake in order to induce us to signal no threat, a signal we enjoy. What isn't funny? Another good example to aid in our understanding of the social context surrounding humour is the 2018 Whitehouse Correspondents dinner. Why wasn't Michelle Wolf funny? If we go back to the idea that humour is a mechanism to signal no threat, this requires that what is being done or said is not perceived as an attack. The venom and abuse meted out by the left-wing media over the period of the Trump presidency has created a profoundly adversarial relationship between the media and the White House. The roasting of Sarah Huckabee Sanders was not perceived to be a fake situation for comic effect. It was perceived to be an extension of the constant stream of abuse the left-wing media fires at the Trump White House. Contrast that with the roast of Sammy Davis Jr., links below. We perceive friends ribbing each other, which is why it is funny. How comedy affects the world. Humour is powerful in its social impact within groups, and it can therefore be used to, bring people together, identify those who consider themselves to be outside our group, who do not laugh with us and do not signal no threat to us. It can signal no threat in social relationships. It can facilitate speaking truth to power, as what is said is couched in a no threat signal. It can identify those who are insecure because they make too many jokes at their own expense, as they feel the need to signal no threat overtly and repeatedly. It enables us to understand the differences in humour between cultures and between sexes. Women and humour. Can women be funny? Of course, but if we look at the 2A laughter equation, the first variable requires a situation of potential conflict. Women do not represent the same physical threat that men do in the primitive tribal context, and therefore the need to signal no threat is reduced. A woman falling on her face does not represent a risk of physical attack to those nearby in the way that a man falling does, as men are typically physically stronger and often gain social standing through physical conflict. Again, this is in the primitive tribal context. This is why women do not see physical humour as funny in the way that men do, and why it is extremely difficult for women to be funny using physical humour, physical comedy. Women have different routes to social advancement than men, or perhaps they emphasise different mechanisms. The social mistakes or vulnerabilities that are simulated by women for comic effect are therefore different and reduced in scope. Donald Trump. Oh, this is a good one. This will get me hated. Trump and Rocket Man. For those who are not aware, President Trump referred to the dictator of North Korea as Rocket Man on a few occasions. Whether or not he understands why what he is doing is a good strategy, President Trump's use of humour in this context, in my humble opinion, proves that he is very smart, very sane, has a deep understanding of people, and is committed to world peace. President Trump used humour, this carefully constructed sort of insult, in his public communications to Rocket Man as a means of signalling group identity to induce Kim to identify with him, as well as signalling no threat. When this is juxtaposed with the signalling of there will be consequences, it struck a perfect balance to the point where President Trump has got further with North Korea than the previous 4 presidents combined. These minor insults are a tactic that he has used to good effect on a number of occasions. They are deliberately not abusive insults, but just minor digs at people. They have a disarming quality, if you are willing to see it. Humour and ideologues. Because humour requires no harm within the social group, and it signals no threat, any group or individual that is not willing to share a joke about themselves or their beliefs is either an ideologue, someone who considers themselves to be outside your social group, or they mean you harm. Anyone with whom you cannot have a laugh is a threat to you and anyone in your social group. For example, SJWs see everything through the lens of oppression, harm. This is why they cannot accept any race-based humour, which is a tragedy, because people of different races making fun of each other is a bonding activity and signals to both sides that they identify with one another as part of the same social group and that they have no hostile intent. Another aside, one of my pet peeves is people who go on and on about the Jews. If you will forgive me for collectivizing here, one of the things Jews are renowned for is humour. They are perfectly willing to joke around within Western cultures, often making jokes about themselves, which is why you can know for a fact that they identify as being part of Western culture and that they have no hostile intent towards Western cultures. Going forward, I've not seen an analysis of humour like the one I've presented before. All I have seen are analysis of different subjects of humour with no overall understanding of the fundamental nature of laughter and humour or comedy. If what I've presented is correct, and it represents a good foundation to understanding humour, I would like to see this study expanded, as I believe comedy has a lot to offer the world in forwarding peace and understanding. If you have constructive feedback or questions, please add them in the comments. Additional notes. We laugh when play fighting to ensure that what is happening is not misunderstood to be a real fight. This is a response shared with rats and likely other animals. That laughter evolved so long ago in our past, the ancestor we shared with rats, highlights how fundamental it is to our psychology. I would love to see fMRIs of people laughing at different types of jokes, assuming that fMRIs have the temporal resolution to track the progression of the signals through the brain. There are multiple facets of this explanatory framework that would greatly benefit from further study. Assuming that it is possible to find any psychologists in universities that are not hard left ideologues, there is a great scope for study to quantify the aspects of humour I have detailed here and how different personality traits affect how humour is perceived. I raise the concern about the hard left takeover of universities, the humanities especially, as humour requires that participants are willing to be conciliatory. The hard left professors are specifically teaching the need for violence and conflict in universities, which precludes the possibility of understanding mechanisms of signalling no threat. The rigid, ideology-driven positions of many in the humanities subjects in universities today does not fill me with hope that this will be studied fairly, because if the implications of my ideas do not coincide with the ideology, they will be dismissed. I hope I am wrong. Thank you very much for listening.